Well, speculation continues on the health of North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un. Reportedly, he is in grave danger following a stent procedure. What could a possible change in leadership in Pyongyang mean for relations with China and China's position as a global superpower? Let's bring in retired Lieutenant Colonel Jay Carafano, the Heritage Foundation Vice President for National Security and Foreign Policy. Obviously, in Washington and in capitals all over the world, James, people are wondering about the health of Kim Jong-il. He hasn't been seen in public, and I guess what raised a lot of questions is that he did not appear in public to celebrate the birthday of his grandfather, Kim Il-sung, back on April 15th. That's a celebration that he hasn't missed during his time as North Korea's leader. Any idea what's going on?
Yeah, here, breaking news. Like, from our perspective, it doesn't matter if the guy's alive or dead. You never make policy on North Korea thinking you know what's actually going inside in North Korea. So our policy should be the same regardless of who is in charge. Maximum pressure, it protects our interests. Missile defense, conventional deterrence, nuclear deterrence, heavy sanctioning. That limits the North Koreans, and it continues to pressure them to come to the table for denuclearization. So who's ever in charge tomorrow, they know that there's one fact in their life that won't change, and that's the United States policy isn't going anywhere.
Reportedly, he was, sounding like he was in ill health during this meeting with President Trump last summer, where they shook hands over the border. People who were there, Tucker Carlson, for instance, said he was wheezing like a very old man, not a guy in his middle 30s.
Right. Yeah, well, it's long been rumored that he's had health issues. That's not new. But again, we really don't know what the dynamics are inside. And if there is a regime change, we don't know how they'll unfold. But here's what we do know. We've now gone with 3 generations of change in this country with some degree of consistency on that. And I think from the U.S. perspective, what you bank on is who's ever in charge of the regime, their number one goal is going to be what's always been their goal, which is keep the regime in charge.
Let's talk a little bit about China now and its behavior as a result of this coronavirus pandemic, which began in that country. Senator Tom Cotton says, at a minimum, he believes China allowed the virus to escape its borders. Listen to this.
I believe the Chinese communist leaders, when they were aware of those facts by mid-January, made the conscious decision not to explain to the world that it was transmissible between humans, not to shut down travel, not to ask for American or other kind of international scientific help, but to allow this virus to escape their borders. Because if they were going to suffer an economic contraction, they were not going to allow the world to continue to prosper and China be the only country whose economy was declining.
What's your assessment, James, of China's behavior here?
Yeah, I go with what's absolutely indisputable, which the facts cannot be questioned whatsoever. They knew it was highly contagious. They let millions of people leave the country knowing it would infect the world. That's a fact. They hid the information on how actually infectious it was for many, many weeks. That prevented a lot of countries, including the United States, from taking adequate preparations. We didn't know the real deal until we started getting data from places like Taiwan and South Korea and Italy and Spain. So they're responsible for the global pandemic. That's not news. The question is how do we do payback? And I think this is really, really important because everybody says, let's get back at China. Okay, fine. Let's get the American economy up and running again. That is equally, if not more important. We got to figure out how to do big things. We're in a competition here. You win a competition by pressing the other guy, but not by hurting yourself. So we've got to get our economy up and running, even as we think about how we're going to learn from this and how we deal with China in the future.
Well, regarding how we deal with China in the future, Senator Cotton says he would like to see a more muscular approach in the future. Here again he is on Sunday Morning Futures.
So many of our basic drugs are made in China. We need to stop that. We need to bring it back to the United States and get it out of China. So we would give incentives to companies to build new plants here, create more jobs here. It's cracking down on Hong Kong and violations of its commitments to Great Britain. When Great Britain returned Hong Kong, it's taking aggressive action in the South China Sea. We need more ships. We need more submarines. We need more bombers. We need more fighters.
Would you agree with that bringing more industry out of China and back home would help our own economy, as you suggest, would be helpful?
You know, I wrote a 3-part plan for this. It's actually on the foxnews.com opinion site. Number 1 is transparency. As much transparency we bring with what the Chinese are actually doing, then people will make smart decisions about doing in China. I think that's the most important one. The second is people are talking about what can we do to keep people from doing business in China. And I would flip that on its head and say, why can't we make it easier for people to do business in America? So let's look internally and take away every excuse from anybody to want to do business here. And I think the third one is we're never going to make everything here, and we don't need to. But we don't have to do business with China. If you just take, for example, India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, and say Indonesia, that's an industrial base that's every bit as cheap, every bit as accessible, every bit as useful as China. We can do business with those guys. So I think we need to be smarter about doing business with our friends.
Without perhaps the theft of intellectual property that often comes with doing business with China. James Carafano from the Heritage Foundation. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.